perception about people with disabilities, a lot of it depends on really the philosophy of employment that you're actually selling. Which is where I said we look at it primarily as an HR initiative and something where we really believe that every company should be proud to say, I'm an equal opportunity employer. People with disabilities, all disabilities, are encouraged to apply. In much the same way we used to do for women for so many years. I'm really going to stop here, but I'm happy to take any questions.
But one thing is this other disability here, like we know that it's visible and invisible is invisible. And when you were talking about a person who had schizophrenia, and did you ask a certificate from his doctor?
Yeah, no, what I was trying to say was we have also received, he was fine, but we've also had candidates coming across with this very sketchy kind of thing, which doesn't help us. The more supportive, documentation we have, the better.
Because see, like private hospitals or like NGOs who have OP clinics can give but you can't get that from a person who is accessing the government institute, like Institute of Health is IMH. We won't get any certificate. In that case, what will be your response?
I don't know, you need to tell me, but I'm just saying from the point of view of, because I'm not in that field really, but I think if there's some way that perhaps when the person comes to us, can we refer him to someone, outside of the government scheme by way of just additional support, because we know that there are some difficulties which are more challenging to place, I would say, not impossible or difficult, more challenging. The more strengthened we are in terms of knowing that person, the better it is. So one way that I could think of was if someone comes to us with that, perhaps I could just straight away, refer him to, say, the Banyan, for example. That would help.
I think it's very difficult to get from the site.
I accept that. I have no issue. I'm just saying that it would help more.
Also, there is a tendency, Janaki, I think Punita comes from this perspective, that there's a tendency sometimes for a psychiatrist or for a medical professional to be sort of too scientific and even a little too cautious in their perspective. That's where she comes.
No, I agree. I agree also.
Nisreen wanted to ask a question.
If you could just go back to the PF and other such schemes
Sorry.
or benefits
Yeah.
that employers make it attractive.
I'm sorry, I should have touched on that. Actually, there's a bit of a history to that because in 2006, when we did our job fair, Mr. Chidambaram was actually finance minister at the time. And one of the things he asked us to do was to give him a little note on what possibly could be incorporated to the budget by way of incentives. Because for so long, we've been talking about incentives, right, for private sector companies. Government, public sector, we know there's 3% reservation. What is happening with 3% reservation? I'm not going into now. But private sector, what happens? So there are various examples, right? So you either give tax incentives or you give grants to organizations to make the environment accessible for people with disabilities. So various countries like Japan and other places all have tried various things. A tax incentive seems to be working quite well because that's something that people respond to very well. But in this case, what happened is that it's been really linked to the Employees Provident Fund, which all companies are obviously obliged to contribute to. And in the case of people with disabilities, I can mail you the exact provision because there's something to do with the number of employees that you actually have in the organization, and it's subject to a cap on salary, so of the person who's actually employed. But basically, it means that the government will take over that contribution towards the provident fund. So to the extent that the more people you employ, the burden, so to speak, of contributing to the employees' provident fund will be taken by the government in that case. But I can certainly, I will mail you the exact provision of it because I should get it.
The same as the other PF, then the 6,500.
Yeah, what I meant is whatever that component of contribution, or what I meant was in terms of how many employees must you have, and there is something there. As far as disability is concerned. Yeah.
And it has largely been true that the doctors are not going to write certificates and there is a reluctance. And resistance is something that that we have to understand and work with in any case. My main solution is not actually that if the government doctor is not writing the certificate, that we go to a private person. That is not the solution. I think about 2 decades ago when Sanjeevni actually started the first daycare center, and one of the founders what the need and what the nature of the certificate is. Very often the reluctance comes from a fear that I might have to go to court and be present in court, which, believe me, is a hugely problematic experience. If it is very clear to the doctor as to why he's writing the note, not necessarily a certificate, and what it is that he is expected to do, and in what way this will benefit the individual. The experience that we had was that it was not necessarily so difficult. So in that sense, working through those resistances at all levels, because even medical practice actually doesn't look at employment. The nature of the intervention, as we discussed yesterday, the fact that this itself will alter in many ways the processes of recovery is something that is changing and changing quite rapidly. So it shouldn't be, it is not going to be an easy task, but it is not necessarily going to be an impossible task to work with the doctors and get them to write those certificates.
So in that case, we ask them the medicines, what medicines are they eating? So they show us their prescription and all that, which again we refer to our doctor who comes there, and based on that.
I think the thing is that if you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answers.
Of people who have, say, not completed schooling or lower end kind of thing, unskilled, people like that, or is it only those who are qualified and higher end jobs?
People who have completed graduation and upwards, although we have often taken 12th standard as well for specific jobs when companies have approached us. We also now work with the group of intellectual disabilities as a separate category. Not because we believe that employment needs are not there, it's just that this is itself a very, very large group, and therefore we are focusing on that. But so we don't, to answer your question, we won't officially, for example, take on people who have not completed school or whatever. But if any opportunities, people often approach us for employment. So either we sort of refer them to organizations where we know that there may be candidates available, or if we know someone, then we do. But on a regular basis, we really work with people who are graduates.
Are you looking at actively engaging with the lot that Lata is referring to as well?
At this point, no, not really.
Yes, of course.
One question for you from me, which is, what will it take to entice you to Pune? If you can open up, because I'm sure we could arrange infrastructure for you to set up a service if you can put people in and train them. So you should think of coming and maybe even branching out, because I think the need is across the country, and you've got experience. You're better off in expanding and going to other cities, and I'm sure there are places in Pune, and Mr. Bakshi is not here, and so I would very happily, I'm not speaking for them, but at least provide spaces where you can work.
If you want to do your fair in Bombay, then we have support.
So you've got two offers of help now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On that very fair note, can I ask all of us to come and have some tea, and we'll come back with the presentations because we can't
And there's a change in the order. So you have Lavanya now speaking. She was listed 7, but she's going to give her presentation now. And can I request everybody that if we keep the presentation short, then we can actually have more discussion. Okay, over to you.
And before I make my presentation, I'd like to make a request. Please ask questions after I finish completely. Don't interrupt me in between, because the train of thought tends to get lost if you interrupt me. Okay, now I welcome all of you to this presentation. Now the topic is, the paper title is Conceptualizations on how FST, Feminist Self-Therapy, a model that reflects experiential practices could be utilized for the sustained employment of people with severe mental illness, a set study phenomenological analysis, and an insider's perspective. So, at one point in time, I was a severely mentally ill person, but today I'm completely recovered. And I'd like to brief you up a bit about my history. I came from I was part of a very gender stereotyped environment, and I was very ambitious. My mother's expectations of me were based on traditional views of what a girl ought to be like. So there was an ego conflict between me and her, and I was pulled out of a graduate course which I was trying to complete. So because I tried to go against gender stereotypes, and that was her way of punishing me. So at one point in time, I was just shivering and sitting in one corner of the room, crying, not able to walk to the nearest bus stop, not able to do anything. I was declared a medical failure after being made to stay home for a year by my mother, and I had dropped out of a basic degree course, and I developed a writer's cramp as a result of underconfidence. And I needed to start from the scratch. My story of recovery talks of how I did a BA, MA, MPhil, PhD in women's mental health and became a mental health professional myself with a good job. So that is what I... So now FST is a capabilities-informed approach. It is based on the recovery movement, and recovery asks not what such persons should be content with, but what they should be capable of, and how that might be best facilitated and sustained. This is in essence what a capabilities-informed approach to enhancing employment of the psychosocially disabled seeks to accomplish. And this is the major shift in approach required. And I should also mention that I've also been a caregiver. I rehabilitated my own relative, and I've rehabilitated 4 other women with mental illnesses. So, one thing that was the first step to my recovery was that I had to find a way of refocusing attention outside myself. And when it comes to the methodology that is involved in this kind of a thing, this kind of an enterprise, it was qualitative research methodology, which adopted participatory action research and phenomenology, which looked into my lived experiences as also the lived experiences of the others that I tried to rehabilitate. Now, what is this FST and how to institute, it deals with how to institute an environment where rehabilitation for employment will work. We can have psychosocial rehabilitation, we can have psychotherapy, we can have drug rehabilitation, we can have occupational therapy, but what is the environment that is required, that is conducive for these other therapies to work? What exactly is needed? And believe me, I'm going to give you an insider's perspective. So, yeah. So you can see the slide. There might be some ways of implementing other therapies which are deficient, and my support regimen is called FST. So the first point is, there are 26 points to the support regimen, and I don't even call it a new model, it is just a support regimen. So the discourse of psychoanalysis, as per, I'm going to point out the difference between other modes of support and my mode of support. So the discourse of psychoanalysis is also other traditional therapies that contain male-defined ideas about what it means for a woman to be normal may not be problematized. But this mode of support, FST, problematizes and questions the very gender stereotype discourse of psychoanalysis and seeks to tackle it. And mental illness could be, in other therapies, seen as a consequence of role rejection by the woman. I would say that mental aberration may be a psychological protest against role stereotyping and hence may require intervention in the family, as also society itself, as also the professional setup. So the other modes of therapy consider the clinic to be a thoroughly non-subjective and objective context. I say, that I as a feminist would maintain that social inference happens in the clinic, since the clinic is also a social context. Whereas the psychiatrist, being human, comes with their own set of experiences, biases, likes and dislikes. So I only deal with women with mental illnesses, and that's my area of expertise. especially schizophrenia. And in traditional modes, they say cognitive distortions prevent the user from responding to therapy. More on that later. Rather than just blaming the user, I say, it must be accepted that many a time wrong cues could have been given to the user by the environment and the professionals themselves. And then, you see, the user is being dubbed a medical failure on account of not responding to therapy or medication. In my mode of support, the user is given FST to respond to medication when required, irrespective of whether or not medication is required. There's a need to look for professional as well as infrastructural drawbacks. So when the user is assertive about something, the therapist very often contradicts the user as they think they know better and should induce a change in the user, thus making the user feel invalidated and underconfident. So I say self-confidence in a mentally ill woman is already very low. The user should thereby be supported to build her self-confidence. The people around her should be trained to support her whenever she expresses confidence or asserts something with a lot of motivation. They should not accuse her of building castles in the air or harboring delusions of grandeur. And then the positives in the user are not specifically detected and encouraged or reinforced. I say in an attempt to induce self-confidence and self-esteem in the user, all that is positive and good and constructive in the user is pointed out and reinforced in order to encourage her to pursue her ambitions. And then the immediate family of the user is not specifically sensitized and trained to be bold and act as if nothing has happened. Thus the family members keep acting and talking and indirectly cueing without the knowledge that something disastrous or irreconcilable has happened to the user. Now the user is positively, in my mode of support, assured that she is going to recover. She asks questions like, will I be able to recover and do all that I want to do and I'm capable of doing in life? The family is specifically trained to be supportive to the user as part of the support regimen. In the other therapy sessions, if you go to these government mental hospitals, are non-creative in therapy, and here the supportive environment is made motivating through the use of bright colors and music. Now the user spends more time in therapy rather than outside very often. So I say therapy should just be one aspect of a user's life. It is therefore more important to open up new worlds to support the user so that she can focus energy and attention outside herself and not dwell upon her problems and insecurities. So examples could be going to college where there's a very lively social atmosphere, or being part of an extensive and dynamic sales campaign. And prescriptions are being doled out for yoga, aerobics, meditation and low salt intake. I'll say a basic level of security should be fostered within the user before she starts to indulge in yoga, meditation or aerobics or whatever. And then users are not being sufficiently trained to prevent the energy from leaking out in, specifically trained to prevent the energy from leaking out in unwanted ways. So users here are specifically trained to be secure within themselves, and this will automatically prevent them from indulging in activities that are unnecessary. Users are being trained specially to be in the present and not constantly think of the past and the future, although some degree of appropriate planning for the future would help. So in an attempt to foster self-reliance in the users, they should be spoken to as if they're normal and encouraged to participate in public activities as much as possible. They'll be exposed to a wide range of situations and appropriately counseled when they get into problems in these situations so that they will after some point know how to deal with situations that arise all by themselves. Examples could be attending phone calls, shopping for groceries, planning a trip, etc. And they will be taught to analyze their moods and handle them. And they will be assisted in attaining normalcy in the context of their daily activities. And we do not attempt to change the basic personality of the users. Nevertheless, their positives are enhanced. A highly sensitive user, for instance, should not be attempted to be desensitized, but should be told to channelize their sensitivity. And the professional will be trained to not exhibit body language or use words that are unfavorable to the user. The user will be trained and encouraged to be adventurous, and the user will be specifically motivated in that she will be told interesting stories of people who had specific problems and overcome them, and watch video clippings of these people also. So specific importance will be given to replace negativity with positivism, and this will be done through auto-suggestion and self-hypnosis. The therapist will encourage the user to cling on to modes and means that give her security, provided they're reasonably safe. Things like religion. And we feminists call for reintroduction of the humanitarian criteria that as of late commercialized mental health settings. This mode of support will thus be economically more feasible. and everything is very transparent, and the profession acknowledges her faults or his faults, whoever it is. And the profession will, if required, talk to the user about the profession's personal life so that a personal bond or a special bond with the user is established. So we are hitting at past structures here. We do not show power over the people we treat. And more holistic this is, plus the user and therapist share a personal bond. And the user is empowered as a woman, and after a point it's predominantly self-dependent. You're telling the user how she can implement support on herself, instead of always being dependent on a psychiatrist or a psychologist to do this for her. These then were the logistics pertaining to the kind of unusual support I came up with, and which my caregivers practiced on me to facilitate my recovery from schizophrenia as a first step to facilitating employment. What then consequent to this above FSD approach are the ingredients to making a severely mentally ill woman job functional? So, what I like to say is, pre-vocational training as per our experience would not be of much help. On-the-job training would be certainly yielding better results. Also, other components of training that will be incorporated into the FSC approach would be skill training, job clubs, and career planning, and some of them have already been touched upon in the previous presentations. FST could be combined with these for better on-the-job performance. Mine is a study of self-integration to achieve utmost of job competence, and I think the experience and suggestions of self-advocates like me need to be valued, since we provide an insider's perspective on what can happen deep within and how that translates into employment potential. And workplace support substantially increases job retention rates, and qualitative outcome indicators reflecting lived experiences need to be employed for a holistic assessment of how much the support helps and where and how it needs to be taken.